Welcome to Cure America. I am Donald Eason, the new president of the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. I have the distinct honor of sitting here today with Jonathan Alexandre, Vice President of Government Affairs for Liberty Counsel, and I had the opportunity to do a little research on Jonathan to look at his background, and he's originally from Boston. He's here in D.C. with us now, working for Liberty Counsel. He just mentioned to me that his father's a pastor, but he decided to become a lawyer. So we just asked him a little bit about his background. How did you make that decision to become a lawyer?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and thanks for having me, Donald. Yeah, growing up, I saw my father preach the whole counsel of God, and he would not pull punches. He would describe what God called sin as sin, and he would call it out, engaging in a culture, in a very progressive culture up in Boston, Massachusetts. And at a young age, the age of 7 actually, I realized, and only through sort of divine enlightenment can God bring this to someone at the age of 7. I realized that, if my father keeps preaching the way he will, just like the Apostle Paul or just like some of these disciples, government can come after him and try to silence him or throw him in jail or even worse. You saw the persecuted church in the 90s all across the world really, whether it's China or North Korea, really getting pressure on their faith. And so at the tender age of 7, I realized that, hey, my dad is doing the same thing they're doing. What's going to stop him from being thrown in jail or, or worse? And at that age, I realized that, hey, if my dad ever gets called into court or called before a judge, he's going to need an attorney to stand by his side. And I want to be that attorney. I want to be that guy that stands next to the pastors. And, God allowed through his providence, I think through his sovereignty, my life to take twists and turns, but ultimately bring me back to what was an original calling, to be able to defend the faith, to be able to defend the rights of pastors and Christians, to preach the gospel without holding back and not be afraid of big government coming in and trying to silence them. So that's what brought me to Liberty University, where I graduated, and ultimately brought me to Liberty Counsel, where I practice law now.
All right, excellent. Yeah, it's amazing that you had that insight at 7 years old.
Yeah, that's the Holy Spirit, for sure.
Because America, we live in a country was founded on Judeo-Christian principles, and I'm glad to have you sit next to me at Liberty Counsel right here in D.C. And we've been used to really, like what you said, your dad he preached an entire counsel of God. We've been used to being able to do that here in America, but it's changed a lot since you were 7 years old.
That's absolutely right.
And so at Liberty Counsel, you're now VP of Government Affairs. But where did you start out at Liberty, and how did you get to the position you're in now?
Yeah, so I started as Director of Public Policy. My training was sort of at the state level. So after I graduated law school, went back to Massachusetts. At the State House, it's one of the, I think, the oldest directed elected Senate in the world. So it goes back to even before America was founding. There was the Massachusetts General Assembly, and they're still in practice today. So they have that underpinning. On almost every wall across the Capitol, there's verses. On almost every stone across the Boston Common, there's verses that talk about our Judeo-Christian founding. It's almost as if, the prophetic words of Christ, that if the church is silent, then the rocks are going to cry out. That's what it's like in Massachusetts. And so I started there at the state level, doing State House work, and sort of as a parallel, I always call State House work like an NBA player that can go back to his local park. Like you get your training at the park.
Okay.
You're supposed to be able to do pickup games at your park whenever you go back and play. Yes, you're at the majors or you're playing at the professional level, but you should always be able to go back to the State House or your local school board and still have an impact there. And I think that's where God called me originally, gave me the training, the tools I needed to ultimately come to D.C., where I'm doing the same sort of work, policy, litigation work here at the federal level. But, there's really a passion that folks that are passionate about public policy and religious liberty, there's an outlet for that in state houses. You have your members of the Senate and your delegates or your representatives that you can have access to at your state houses. So, that was my training ground, and ultimately I think God used that to propel me here to D.C., where we're doing the same sort of work for religious liberty and for the protection of life.
Okay, excellent. I like that analogy, because that's exactly what the pro ballers do. They go back to their local parks,
Exactly,
and they get in the mix, and then they get back to the professional when the season starts. And so at Liberty Counsel, I'm sure now your season is 24/7.
That's right. Yeah,
365 days a year, 366 in a leap year, right?
Yeah, that's right.
and so I'm looking at some of the cases you have, and you guys have a lot of cases. But before we delve into some of these, if someone wanted to call Liberty Counsel, or needed your services, and I was reading through your website. You guys are international. You're all over the world, really.
Right.
And I see you all support Israel and defend them, which is great. And then we have the pastors out here, going back to your statements you made about your dad, mm-hmm. and knowing that he would need some help. And there are pastors out here that sometimes they feel like they're by themselves.
That's right.
What would they need to do to potentially get the services of Liberty Counsel? Is it a cost to be a part of a network of pastors or even concerned citizens, or is this pro bono work? How does it work to use Liberty Counsel?
Good important question. It is pro bono work, so our time is given voluntarily. So you will not get an invoice, you will not get a charge when you pick up the phone and call Liberty Counsel, or you go to our website, lc.org, and it's hundreds, if not thousands, in certain years, tens of thousands of cases come across our desk. And it is average day people. It's the pastor that is, yes, the shepherd, sort of carrying, the weight of his organization, but also tending to his sheep. And you have mothers, fathers, parents, students, every walk of life. When they're expressing their faith or they're wanting to share about Christ, there's, either a pesky law or a pesky government official or someone that is offended by their outward expression of faith. As Scripture said, you'll be persecuted for what you believe, just as they persecuted Christ. Mm-hmm. That's coming against congregants and individuals more and more. And so you're seeing that uptick in the fight. And certainly pastors have a weight that they have to carry, but the average everyday citizen that wants to express their faith, they're feeling that weight as well. And so Liberty Counsel is poised, once again, free of charge, to be able to come alongside of people with legal help, with help in the legislature, but also creative ways to navigate an increasingly secular society and still maintaining your belief in your faith.
Excellent, excellent. Well, here at Cure, we're about personal responsibility, about faith. We have a clergy network. We want them to be able to preach the full counsel of God. So I'm glad we have you. We have Liberty Counsel. If something should go, I say, awry or astray in terms of some persecution, because Jesus Christ did exactly say that. No servant is above their master.
That's right.
They persecuted him, they're going to persecute us. Right. And we're seeing some of that in different areas, and that's where I want to turn to now, with some of the cases that you guys have actually worked on at Liberty Counsel. One of them is this case where I'm seeing here a school refused a Christian to graduate. What was that about?
Yeah, pretty incredible. Right next door in Montgomery County, Maryland. So the state legislature, as many state legislatures have done, have put in place sort of frameworks for kids to graduate. You're required to take these many courses, and it's fine when schools used to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, and you'd qualify in that regard. But now they're adding all sorts of nonsense via extreme sex education, sort of gender identity. This particular student was an outstanding student, had something like a 4.6 GPA, 1200 LSAT, just a high average student in terms of what she was able to achieve academically. But there was this one portion of the curriculum that she wanted to be exempt from. She didn't want to participate in their human life and sexuality portion of the curriculum that taught these aggressive sort of LGBT agenda, saying that there's 250 different ways that you can identify, that the Q and LGBTQ opening an entire pantheon of ways that this young girl was supposed to pick and choose how she identified. She just wanted to be exempt from that part, but still obviously demonstrated that she was an excellent academic student. They said, because you didn't fulfill these requirements here, and this is even back in April, that you won't be able to graduate. You won't be able to walk because you didn't want to sit down and be indoctrinated via this LGBT nonsense is what it is. And so, cases like this, unfortunately, are popping up all across the country where a parent, or in this case, a student, is like, I'll perform well in school, but I'm not going to take the indoctrination. I'm not going to take the unhealthy choices that you're foisting on me. I'm not going to take the explicit, obscene material that's coming along with your sex curriculums. I'll still perform well in school, but leave that aside. Give me an opt-out. Maryland didn't want to afford her that opt-out, and so her ability to graduate is in jeopardy.
Wow. Is that a case that Liberty would take on to hopefully not just give her as a high school senior wanting to opt out of it, but even giving parents an opportunity to opt out of these kind of egregious programs for their younger kids? Is that something that Liberty Counsel helps parents fight?
Yeah, absolutely. So the alligator that's closest to the boat, of course, is that young girl being able to walk across stage, demonstrating that objectively she has all the requirements to walk across stage and graduate and take her diploma to an accredited university and go on with what is going to be obviously a stellar education career and a strong work career afterwards. She has that trajectory. So we come into these cases looking at the individual and their rights, their meritorious claims under the First Amendment to have religious exemptions from being taught a certain way, to be able to supplement that curriculum with something else so she could be able to go out to another school and get that curriculum, and so the issue of school choice arises. But also, as you mentioned, the parent's ability to say, for a child not as old as this one, but a younger child who's 4 or 5 years old, that's how early they're introducing these things, that, yeah, we want to exempt our child. We want to be the first ones to talk to our children about, this issue or sexuality. We want to be the ones, knowing where our child is, to walk them through this at a pace that's conducive for them. And so the parental rights aspect of it and the ability to opt out are all ways, in a legal case, we can make these claims in front of the court. But the flip side in legislation, just making sure that the federal government and states have those laws in place. So we can take an individual situation like hers and say, we'll fight this in the court, but we'll also make sure that the legislature is not doing anything to complicate this and that they're respecting parental opt-outs and parental rights as well. So it's two sides of the same coin, ultimately, to try to vindicate this young girl's right to be able to live out her faith and not have government pressure her to learn something that she doesn't want to be involved in.
Wow. Wow, that's unbelievable, because we see it going on, as you mentioned, across the country, and she just simply wants to live her life, really. And obviously she's been a stellar student, and to refuse her the opportunity to graduate because they want to teach her something that she doesn't want to learn is incredible to me.
Yep.
And part of, obviously, once you become a senior in high school, junior and senior, there's just a certain path you want to go down, and clearly she knows her path. 4.6.
Yeah, she's a stellar candidate, and I guess that's where the ultimate rub is. Individuals of faith, because of the Protestant work ethic and because of what God requires of us, like, we're not doing these things for ourselves. God requires that everything your hand touches, you do so to glorify God, whether you eat or drink. And so that's what she's taken to her academics. There's just this one portion that offends her faith and her conscience that goes against the very thing that she's trying to work out. And she's like, no, I don't want a part of this.
And it's not needed.
Yeah. What's the point of 250?
Value, right?
250 different gender identities that she has to choose from. That's not going to make her a better person.
And as a Christian, we know it's only two.
Exactly.
And so when you start introducing this kind of egregious education, and that makes, and I'm gonna say it just makes no sense to me, right?
and they trip over themselves. It was 56 on Facebook was the large number that they went. And now it's something like 250 identities that contradict themselves within the identity itself. Anyway.
Wow. Yeah, we don't want to run down that rabbit hole. But we have more to talk to Jonathan Alexandre about. We are nearing the end of this segment. We look forward to talking to him about, we're the Center for Urban Renewal and Education, and education is a big piece. So we're going to pick up again in our next segment, talking about some things that are going on in some schools in Michigan. And so stick with us on our next segment with Jonathan Alexandre.
Pastors from across the United States took to the skies this week, their flights converging on Washington, D.C. As they journeyed toward the nation's capital, they prepared to gather at CURE's headquarters for discussions rooted in faith and truth. These faithful leaders engaged in vital discussions on pressing issues facing society. A key focus was the necessity of a biblical worldview, essential for understanding reality, morality, and purpose in a world shaped by secular ideologies. It equips believers to navigate cultural challenges with clarity and conviction. They also examine diversity, equity, and inclusion through a biblical lens. Scripture reveals God's design for humanity, created equal in His image, yet diverse in callings and cultures. True unity and justice come from Christ's transformative power, reconciling us to God and each other. They discussed what God's Word says about work, ethnicity, and education. Work as a divine calling, ethnicity reflecting God's creativity, and education as pursuing wisdom rooted in reverence for Him. These areas are integral to living out faith, addressing the church's role in contemporary society, particularly regarding political figures like President Donald Trump. They underscored that the church must proclaim biblical truth faithfully, not align with any one figure or party. The church should speak to power with grace, courage, and commitment to God's standards. Finally, they celebrated Black pastors' support for Israel, sharing insights on why this aligns with Scripture's promises and God's heart for His chosen people. Their voices reminded us of the deep connection between the Black church and the biblical call to bless Israel. As the pastors departed, they left inspired and united, having strengthened Cure's mission to advance truth, justice, and freedom through the unchanging Word of God.
Somebody comes to us when they are the most vulnerable. We have an obligation to our patients to tell the truth as we learned it and to not politicize it. We are performing surgeries on these children, and the only people benefiting is the medical industrial complex, because the more surgeries that are done, the more money is made.
Whether you're talking about an 8-year-old or an 11-year-old or a 14-year-old, I don't see how you can actually derive informed consent.
We all know that we can't be getting true informed consent.
Our medical industry has objectively been compromised in more ways than one.
You become familiar with the sound a mother makes when you tell her that her child is dead.
Find out more at whatisadoctor.org.
Welcome to Cure America. Welcome back. I'm here with attorney Jonathan Alexandre with Liberty Counsel, VP for Government Affairs. And we left off in our last segment talking about what's going on in some of our school systems, and particularly a young lady that's being not being permitted to graduate because she doesn't want to take a course talking about 250 different genders, which really should have nothing to do with her ability to graduate. She's a 4.6 GPA student. She's 1,200 on the LSAT, I believe you said, and so she's a stellar student. She wants to opt out. They're not letting her. And Liberty Counsel is right there alongside of her to help her hopefully get her diploma so she can move on to continue her education. And so I want to just pick up with you, Jonathan, on education. Really, let's just start out with the big beautiful bill. Yeah. They have school choice in there, which is something I'm sure Liberty Counsel is an advocate of in different areas. What are your thoughts on that in the bill? Because I haven't read all of it, but I know it's a part of it, and I know it's definitely needed, especially based on what we just talked about. Yeah. So the school choice issue, generally, pulling back what that actually means, if you're working 10 hours of the day, say on your feet, you're a roofer, you're out there in the sweltering heat, or you're out tending to a farm, whatever you're doing, you're a nurse, 10 hours that you work out of that day, 4 of those hours you're working for someone else, which means the government comes in, takes that pool of money and decides what it wants to do with it. 40% of that they use for your local school. So they're taking money right out of your pocket, giving it to the local school, and the public education system in its founding does have merit. It gives the opportunity in its founding for individuals to learn how to read so that they could read the Bible and dispel Satan's myth. That was the purpose of public education. That was the first law that passed in Massachusetts. So it has a good underpinning. But in areas where it's diverted from its original path,
that same money that you work for, that same tax that you're paying, school choice just says, let's allow you to keep that money and find a school that's best for your child. So it can be religious education if that's how you want to raise your child, or it can just be an individualized education plan. If your child has, a special need or a particular way that they need to learn, you can find the school that's appropriate for your kid. But what the system has turned into is locking these kids into failing zip codes, locking them into the jurisdiction that's closest to their home, and requiring them to go there when there may be better options that parents want to take their money and have their kids go to those schools. And so that's ultimately what the school choice question is. You see a number of states putting bills forward that allow the money to follow the children to the appropriate schools. And, hopefully if this language stays into the reconciliation bill, we can see a greater move from the federal government recognizing that that's where the money belongs. It certainly doesn't belong at the federal level. It should stay close to home, stay in the pockets of parents, and allow them to direct the upbringing of their children in education using the money that they've worked hard for.
Excellent. And what you brought up, so 40% of basically our first dollar we make goes to the government, and then 40% of that 40% goes to the education.
Exactly.
And so parents should have that opportunity, because we're about school choice here at Cure, and of course if we look at it from a scriptural standpoint, the Bible says to parents, raise up your child in the way they should go.
Absolutely.
And when they are old, they will not depart from it. We have the first responsibility as being responsible for our children's education. And this is the first bill I've seen. You've been more locked into the Washington D.C. area, because we have the Department of Education that's over at the federal level, that's over our schools, and now we're trying to put forth this legislation for school choice for parents. Have we ever had any other bill with that kind of language in it before? I'm not familiar.
At the state level, you'll see a lot more.
Okay.
There's been bills that haven't gone forward. The idea is there, but there's been bills that haven't gone forward at the federal level. You see more and more cases being taken up at the Supreme Court talking to this issue. Some are good, some are bad, but the underlying Supreme Court jurisdiction, or the principle that comes out of the court, is that parents have the first right to direct the upbringing of their children. That means that if a parent wants to pull their child out after a certain age and homeschool them, or homeschool them entirely, or choose religious education, they have that fundamental right. The school choice argument is just saying, well, let their dollar follow their child, instead of, grandparents that no longer are having school-age children are still paying that money to their county.
Right.
Let them put that in in a savings plan for their grandchild, or let them use the money appropriately to raise their child in terms of education. So that's what the argument is. There are a lot of states that have it. Hopefully the federal government reacts positively to this trend and puts this forward.
Well, excellent. Yeah, we want the federal government, their position in this to actually push it forward, because it means a lot, and what you just said, the parents having that responsibility. If it's pushed from the federal level, it just gives, I think, parents more confident that they can steer their child's education, which as you said, we should be able, as parents or grandparents, to steer our children's education. So let's go to the idea of parents being the ones in charge of their children and in charge of their education. I have a questionnaire here from a school system in Michigan.
That makes me nervous.
It's unbelievable, and so I just want to read you a couple of questions off of this and get your thoughts on this, because this is a questionnaire. It says it's a health risk profile, and it says your questions will only be seen by the center staff, whatever that means, whoever the center is. I don't know who that is. And we can talk about the school district. It's outside of Detroit. It's outside of Ypsilanti. And here's the questionnaire. So who is the questionnaire for? It's for grades pre-K.
Okay, so 4-year-olds?
4-year-olds.
Okay.
Right? So I guess they're going to read it to them. Through 12, and then there's actually one on here that says they're not in school, so I don't know how they even get it to this particular person, but this is the questionnaire. And here I'm going to read you a couple of questions before you respond. The first question is, what is your gender identity? A, female, B, male, C, genderqueer or non-binary, and then D, I do not know my gender identity, I'm questioning.
Wow.
That's one question. Question number 2, some people describe themselves as transgender when their birth their sex at birth does not match how they feel about their gender. Are you transgender? No, I am not transgender. A, no, I'm not transgender. B, yes, I am transgender. C, I am not sure if I'm transgender. And D, I do not know what this question is asking. This is K through 12, pre-K through 12, actually.
So 3 and 4 year olds. That doesn't make any sense. The first thing you read is that it's not going to be, your answers won't be given to anyone outside of the care counselors. Like, who are these care counselors?
Exactly.
Like what authority do they have to be reviewing these intimate, before we get to the questions, what authority do they have to be reviewing these intimate answers from children? You know, what did these care counsel, how did they spend their past weekend? What are they waking up to? What are they feasting their eyes on? What's their intention? That's what I want to know first. And when you start peeling back the curtains of some of these school districts, who they're hiring as third parties to do these care counseling, it's the LGBT agenda. It's these folks that are sometimes don't have children themselves that are promoting this. So that's my first thought. Like, who is even reading this from? Who cares about reading this from a 4-year-old? Why are you in that mindset in the first off? But
right,
yeah,
it is. And before you get to the questions, just for our audience to know, this is Durand and Perry schools in Michigan. Wow. Durand and Perry school districts in Michigan. This is a questionnaire that they're putting out to their students. And when I look at that from a pastor's lens, from a parent's, one is they're saying it's not going to be shared outside the center staff, which means parents don't have any idea.
That's a good point. Yeah, that
these questions are being asked to their students. They don't know their children, and they don't know the answers that their children are given. And it seems to me, and then I want you to respond to this, Jonathan. It seems to me by asking these questions, they're being suggestive, because you're dealing with young, immature minds. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so they go off first and say, are you transgender? That's the first question off the bat, or what's your gender identity? Introducing this concept for the kid for the first time that, hey, what I am may not be what I am. And you're talking to 4-year-olds that don't, even 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds don't have the developmental capacity to truly understand who they are. They're discovering themselves, they're growing through adolescence, and all this wants to do is provide confusion. The Bible is crystal clear. Good parenting is crystal clear. You're either born a male or female. This is just introducing suggestively, as you said, this idea that you can be confused, or you don't have to be sure. There's these people out there, and you can be part of that group of people that don't really know who they are. The question that really offends me is the answer, I guess, D to the first question that says, I'm questioning and I'm not sure. Well, the very point of the question is to force you to question. And so, of course, kids, even if they know that they're a boy and that they're different from a girl, or they're a girl and different from a boy, you're placing in their minds like, no, there's a doubt there. You should have a doubt. You shouldn't be confident in who you are. Forget what your parents are saying. Forget what Bible teaches you. Have these questions in your mind. And they're doing it at such an early age that they're trying to indoctrinate these kids. They're trying to trap them in a lifestyle of confusion, which is evil. It's perverting young kids' minds. There's no place for it.
Well, exactly. And why are they asking the question?
Yeah.
In what you just said, they're perverting their minds by definition. Because I remember we had questionnaires when I was in school. There's only 2 questions. Are you male or are you female?
Exactly right. Yeah.
This would go in a whole different direction. So let me ask you this from a legal standpoint.
Yeah.
If a parent in Durand or the Perry School District, they discover this, and what are some actions that they can take against the school district, or just to protect their children?
Yeah, I'll answer it in the inverse. So how parents realize these things. If this wasn't mailed to you, if it wasn't sent to you, like you said, they're saying this is only done in the eyes of the care counselor. So the first step, parents need to get involved. They need to make sure that every material that's taught to their kids is shown to them as well, and you have access to that. The Freedom of Information Act requires that anything that's done in a public setting, including a public school, parents have access to.
Okay.
Go to the school board hearings and make your voice be heard and say, no, I don't want this material taught to my kids. If these school board members are pushing this, then replace them with good men and women of faith that agree with you and that won't indoctrinate your kids in this way. So the first step is information, making sure your eyes and ears are on top of everything your children is watching and being exposed to. The second step, if it's not coming home or if it's not coming through their email inbox, make sure that you're asking for it. Go after the school, go after the superintendent, after the principal, and demand through freedom of information access to all the information that your kid is being taught. And then when you have that document in front of you, make the public outcry. So there's courts where you can fight a really good fight and you can make the legal arguments that because of your faith and because of parental rights, you want to exempt your kid from that. So there's the court argument you can make. You can make the legislative argument that doesn't put any burdens on school districts or principals to be required to teach this, so not anything coming down from the legislature that says they have to be taught this. But the third court is equally important, which is the court of public opinion. Make a big stink about it. Let everyone know that, as you're doing, in this school, in this district, here are a list of questions that they're asking to 4-year-olds. And that's when you really see the change and the shift in culture happen. The vast majority of parents, the vast majority of families all across the country have no tolerance for this. They do not want some unidentified employed person coming in and saying that your 4-year-old has to have a one-on-one conversation questionnaire with them that they'll keep private and keep the parents out. So the more noise we make about this is really how you get some of the quicker change. And then there can be court cases and legislative efforts to follow. But yeah, I think what you're doing, exposing it, is the important first step.
Okay, excellent. So I'm gonna go to the second point you made. I know we're probably running a little bit over, but how important is it to them to reach out to their legislators and make that outcry as well?
Yeah, it's so important. Some scenes that I've seen at state houses, which is why the state house fight is so important, is that the legislature would do just like you did. They'll get up in a hearing and they'll read word for word what is going on. And that stuff is atrocious, but there is even worse material that is being presenting to kids.
Right.
Indescribable things they're talking about, things that we would get censored on if we're talking on open TV or open radio about. We'd get censored for violating FCC rules. That's what they're talking to kids about. So getting involved with the state legislature, presenting this material to them, having them pass bills that allow you to opt out your child, or once again, not requiring the state to have these mandates. Even if you have a friendly principal, or if you've moved your family to a good county where you think, a good, county that protects my parental rights and protects my religious views, you could have a state that pushes this down and says, hey, you're mandated to teach these things. So making sure that the state legislature isn't putting anything in terms of guidelines or mandates that are forcing this, even on local school districts or principals that want nothing to do with this material.
Thank you, Jonathan. This is very, very informative. And what I'd like you to do before we close out this segment, just let people know where they can find you and find Liberty Counsel.
Yeah, the best place to find us is lc.org, so the letter L, the letter C.org, just 5 letters, and you can get on our website. You can fill out the legal help form and guaranteed a phone call back or response via email in order to have your issue, whatever it is, be brought forward in front of our attorneys. You can call us at 407-875-1776, so 407-875-1776. Someone will pick up and work you through these situations. And it's the mothers, it's the fathers, it's the students that usually blow up our lines, because they're average Americans that are facing this every day. Thankfully, we're on the other end of the line, helping and willing to help folks get through their tough questions, but also let them know that they have the backing via the law and the help that we're going to give them in order to overcome whatever adversity is placed in front of them because of their faith.
Yeah, a lot of parents don't know where to go. So I thank God we have you. We have Liberty Counsels, and again to our audience, we just thank you for being here with us. We're again sitting here with Jonathan Alexandre, Vice President of Government Affairs for Liberty Counsels. I'm so glad that Jonathan could join us, and we have another segment. So stay tuned for our final segment here on Cure America.
Somebody comes to us when they are the most vulnerable. We have an obligation to our patients to tell the truth as we learned it and to not politicize it. We are performing surgeries on these children, and the only people benefiting is the medical industrial complex, because the more surgeries that are done, the more money it is made.
Whether you're talking about an 8-year-old or an 11-year-old or a 14-year-old, I don't see how you can actually derive informed consent.
We all know that we can't be getting true informed consent.
Our medical industry has objectively been compromised in more ways than one.
You become familiar with the sound a mother makes when you tell her that her child is dead.
Find out more at whatisadoctor.org.
My name is William Owens, America's poet. During the elections of 2016, I wrote a poem every day, and it's in my book, Poems for America. These poems speak to the issues of our nation like never before. Inspired by God, I know this book of poetry will be a blessing to you, your family, and your community. Visit my website, americaspoet.com.
Welcome back to Cure America. I am here with Jonathan Alexandre, Liberty Counsel, and we've been having some very hot talk here, hot topics. We're talking about what's going on specifically in our schools, and we just mentioned in our last segment, so if you didn't get a chance to hear it, I encourage you to go back to that, where we talked about a questionnaire that was in a school district in Michigan, and some suggestive language to the young people, and we talked about that. And one of the questions, it said, if you feel different than your assigned sex. The fact that you're saying it's assigned, that means there's an assigner. And,
that's right.
And that's right. God,
yep.
Right? He assigned it.
Yep.
But when they ask the question about feeling, the Bible says this, that the heart is wicked most of all. If we just go with our feelings, we can go in any direction or another, which is why that's a dangerous question for young people. Because this questionnaire, again, was for pre-K through 12-year-olds. When, of course, we know a pre-K 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, even 16-year-olds are not sure about some things. You know, we're working our way, trying to find our way through life. We have this peer pressure, and you start asking these kind of questions beginning at 4 years old. That takes you down, I think, the wrong track at the very beginning. And they're hiding these questions from parents. And in that segment, Jonathan gave us some concrete ideas and solutions on how to deal with some of these issues. And so as we continue our conversation, you know, we talked about the big, beautiful bill. And one part of it is defunding Planned Parenthood. And, important. You know,
the big abortion fight, you know, one of the things that brought me to do the work at Liberty Counsel in particular was, you know, sort of an understanding from what Scripture of how God designs life. And it does happen when you have parents, you know, that love you and just continue, as my mom and dad always did, just remind me, just, you know, you're a gift from God. They named me Jonathan, which means Jehovah gives. They just let me know that, hey, you're a gift from God. God has designed you. God has done that 7 billion times in the last 80 years. He's done that trillions of times over all of creation, intricately designing every human being to reflect His image. It's the joy that the triune God, the unity of the Father, Son, and Spirit had in reflecting their image in creation and giving mankind stewardship over creation, little agents of God to be able to bring about His goodness in the world. And that's where God's heart is, and He makes it very clear that He does so in the womb. He does so, as Psalm 139 says, before we knew who we were, God knows us, forming us in the womb. And so having that faith conviction makes you realize that abortion is an evil against it. It's an affront against human life in terms of it being the worst human rights violation is going in and terminating that life before it has the opportunity to live. And it's an affront against who God is. It's destroying His very image on this earth. And you know, you have to lay blame at the devil that comes to steal, kill, and destroy. You have to lay blame at what Proverbs calls a complete abomination, the shedding of innocent blood. And so our fight for life, our fight against Planned Parenthood and against big abortion, is to reaffirm what God has done in terms of designing, but really stand against the enemy that is evil, that wants to kill babies within the womb.
Has Liberty Counsel had to challenge some of these particular issues when it comes to our young people?
Yeah.
And can you share any of that? Not specific cases, but if you can,
yeah.
What's going on? Because they're pushing this agenda throughout the states. They're trying to get parents out of the equation. If a young lady is under 16, she can go and have an abortion in some of these states. Michigan would be one, without parental consent. What can a parent do in that case? Because as you said, really our greatest gift is life. Without life, you can't do anything else. You talked about what the Bible says about the shedding of innocent blood, how that's so egregious to our God who created us. And what is it that parents can do in that case? What is Liberty Counsel doing in particular cases that maybe have come to your doorstep?
Yeah, so important. You mentioned what a parent can do to sort of come to the protection of their 16-year-old. So grandparent that has a baby, their child has a baby in the womb, and the daughter being underage, in certain states there's a judicial bypass. So all the daughter has to do is go to the judge and say, hey, I want this abortion. My parents don't know. The judge can give a bypass and say, you don't have to tell your parents, you can have the abortion. There are other good states that have parental notice where the parent has to know if their underage child is having an abortion, and those laws are good for a number of reasons. If a child is under the age of 14 or in the age of 16 in many states and they're pregnant, that means there's someone that has committed statutory rape. So there is a criminal there that has taken advantage of this young lady to the point that she's pregnant. And so these laws that remove parents out of the equation or sort of substitute a judge for parents, all it does is harm the young girl. And the abortion industry is known for just harming the young girl. The New York Times did an expose on Planned Parenthood where someone masquerading as a 14-year-old girl called up and basically was able to retrieve abortion pills or even go have a surgical abortion. They found ways, loopholes around the system in order to get this 14-year-old girl, someone that was pretending to be 14-year-old, just to show how easy it is for someone that young to get an abortion. So those parental rights laws are important because they at least provide one other layer of security for that young girl that's been harmed. But the abortion industry, what do? Well, they recoil back and they plan again. And so now they're sending abortion pills to this young girl's homes or putting these contraceptive machines in their vending machines these contraceptive pills in their vending machines at school so that, if you have a credit card, you can just swipe and take these pills, or you can get a telehealth visit online and get these pills that they're taking and murdering the innocents within them. So the abortion industry in so many ways has been insidious. They've been the culprit in terms of killing millions and millions of babies, over 70 million babies since Roe v. Wade, the abortion law. But they're conniving. They're finding so many different ways to keep their machine going. And their machine is ultimately serving the devil. It's ultimately a sacrament that the devil is asking when you're killing innocents.
Absolutely.
All throughout the Bible, it was child sacrifice that fueled the devil's empire, and that's what the abortionists are aligning with as they're pushing big abortion all across the country.
You mentioned the abortion pill, and just how easy it is. I read a report recently, and I think when you talk about the evil and the diabolical schemes of the devil and what they're doing with the abortion pill, what they're not doing is they're not telling these young ladies the harm that these pills can do. I just read a report that said almost 11% of young ladies that take one of those pills experience some kind of health crisis that is just now coming out, but it's not as widespread as it ought to be. What is it? Is it anything that a young lady can do if she's been caught up in this? And we all make some bad choices or decisions. But she runs into a health situation because they didn't inform her ahead of time that this could harm you. This could actually kill you. Is there anything they can do about that?
I'm glad you spoke to the point of us all making bad decisions, right? And so at the heart of a pastor, at the heart of the work that we do at Liberty Counsel, is trying to restore good where something wrong has been broken down, trying to restore culture, trying to restore to this young girl the beauty of motherhood. If it's an unintended, unplanned pregnancy, there's still a beauty and a life that comes from it. Cure has a mutual friend, Ryan Baumberger, who was conceived in rape. His father, biological father, raped his mother, and that's how he was conceived. And there's so many stories of individuals that came into this world in unexpected circumstances, but God has turned that around, both to the benefit of the child and to the benefit of that young girl, that mother who's carrying the child. And so touching on that for a point is so important, and that's where the heart of the pro-life movement is.
Yes.
Bringing the multiple blessing that life is to the child and to the family that's receiving a child. And so I think it's good that we touch on that point. On the flip side, the abortion industry, in manufacturing this pill, the first time this pill was used in the early 2000s, it was for stomach ulcers. It's to basically destroy a cancerous or potentially cancerous thing within you. They tweaked the pill, added some forever chemicals in it that never dissolve in the water. They give it a title, RU486. Now they give it another title, mifepristone. And it's a pill that when the mother ingests it, so she's pregnant with the child, it stops hormones from getting to that child. That child, in order to survive at its early stages, needs the hormone progesterone. The mother automatically produces it because God has designed it, just automatically kicks in and starts producing it. This shuts the switch off and blocks that child from receiving that progesterone. So the child is literally starving. It's as if you and I haven't had a meal in 40 days or 100 days in terms of how critical it is for that child to receive that hormone every day. Starves the child shrivels up, turns gray, is basically a gray, small, tiny little infant within the mother's womb now. And then they take another pill that's given to them to expel the child. So it forces contractions, artificial contractions, and it expels the baby. The pill was never intended to do that. It was never designed to do that. The human body, the beautiful physical body, is meant to do everything in the opposite. It will do everything it can to fight to preserve that pregnancy. The child itself will fight in order to survive. This pill comes in. Anytime the FDA was required to review it, they just ignored it. Ignored all the harms, ignored all the studies. They passed it 3 consecutive times, just ignoring all of the known risks. Under the Biden administration, they removed the doctor's visit. So usually you would have to at least have a doctor sit down with the woman, measure them, see how far along they are, estimate their pregnancy. And if it was past 7 weeks, they couldn't give them the pill because that pill was never designed to deal with 9-week-old or 10-week-old babies. But now they're just sending it via telehealth, basically a Zoom call with the doctor, send the pills to this young woman or this young girl. She ingests those pills, and over the period of 4 days, her body is revolting against this pill. It's really fighting against the child within her, fighting against her body's natural ability to carry the child. And she's having to go back and forth from the toilet to the shower, expelling blood, expelling pieces of that baby as it's being let out. Something that abortionists have in their rubric, and I know it's graphic, but it's important to understand just how evil this is. In their rubric, they have something called CS+4, which is the cranium, the spine +4. When they do a surgical abortion, you have to account for, all right, we remove the cranium and the skull fragments, we remove the spine, we have a spine, and we have 4 ligaments, the arms and the legs. In the abortion pill, you have no telling if all of those things have come out. And so there are women that have literally died because they have rotting babies within them that they haven't expelled. Once again, because the pill was never designed to deal with a baby. It wasn't meant for that point, but they've mass produced it now to commit abortions. And so you have all these atrocities, compounding atrocities, not to mention the pain that the young woman is going through, having to deal with seeing at times her baby come out in the toilet, which is the final burying ground for this child that was created in God's image. All of these are compounding evils that harm the woman, that they never tell the young girl that this is what she's going to experience, that they kind of whitewash over. And it's in order to push their bottom line. It's in order to push this abortion narrative that if a child is inconvenient or you don't want this child, you can just expel it. And so I know I went through a lot there, but it's important to know just how extreme this abortion agenda is. But it's right where we're willing to fight. We're picking up the fight right here, because this is where it matters the most. This is where the heart of God is, to protect innocent lives, to protect the women carrying those innocent lives.
Wow. So, I mean, you said a lot, and thank you for sharing all that information with us. It's needed for us to really have a clear understanding. And they're really destroying the mother's life, you know, the baby's life. And then you mentioned something else that I don't know if our audience caught it or not, but you said some of the chemicals in that pill don't break down the water. That sounds like another crisis that is either happening or waiting to happen in our water system. Has that been talked about in any detail?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So two things occur. One, the baby is let out into the water, and our water treatment plants can deal with sticks, they can deal with, you know, little debris that get within the water that we're treating, but they can't deal with human tissue. Human tissue is sort of like elastic, it's viscous. So it's stuffing up against the grates there and, you know, causing overflows. So just from an environmental perspective, if you were to tell people, hey, there are fetal remains in your water, potentially in your drinking water, that's a huge outcry. That's an environmental tragedy that if any hospital were to be dumping babies into water, you'd have an outcry. That's what's going on every day in sewers and in treatment plants all over the country. But the second thing is the pill itself has active metabolites. So things that are synthetic placed in the drug that never break down, which means when they're expelled from the women or they're still within that baby that's been expelled, they get into our water in areas that you know full well in Michigan that have to recycle water, or in California that have to recycle water. You have these active metabolites in them. The drug is used to stop progesterone and to stop the ability basically to reproduce or to end that process. And so the huge infertility crisis that we're facing across the country, there could be a nexus between all that chemical going into our waters, people ingesting or bathing or being in contact with that water and not being able to conceive. It affects both women in their process, but also men as well, lowers their ability to be fertile. So I think your point is very valid. What's in our water? You know, is the abortion fetal tissue, is the contaminants from this pill, is that polluting our water? It's a really big question that we have to start asking. And once again, it's a question that anytime the EPA was faced with it or the FDA, they just ignored it. They just decided, hey, this isn't going to be a problem. But
this is the agency supposed to be protecting us.
Yeah, exactly.
Ignoring it.
Yeah. Once again, the money that we're given to these entities to say, hey, make sure we have clean water, that we have clean air, and that we're not ingesting anything, putting anything in our body to harm us. They're just like, because of the abortion industry, we're just going to literally ignore the obvious harms that you're able to bring up.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you all are fighting the fight, because we're definitely trying to fight the fight here at CURE. We have a policy report out on abortion, specifically in the Black community and how it's harming it. And what you're mentioning, I don't even think the pill was out when we put that report out, so we're updating it right now with that new information. But this is just something our audience needs to know about.
I think you're right.
Excuse
Absolutely.
me. And with the few minutes we have left, I just want to switch gears a little bit and talk about Israel.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
And what's happening, and really how it has come here to America, and what happened last week, and maybe 2 weeks by the time this show was out, to those young people that came outside of the Jewish Museum. What is Liberty Counsel doing now about Israel and what's going on with Israel?
So we have a long-standing official relationship with the government of Israel, where we're able to bring students, bring pastors, but mainly students to Israel for them to see it themselves. Students seem to be the epicenter, especially in our universities, Columbia, Harvard. They're at the epicenter of this anti-Semitic rage that is going on all across campuses. And so we've taken, year over year, when it's safe enough to do so, year over year we've taken about 500 students to Israel in buses of 50 each, and just let them see the land for itself. For you and I, as people of faith, as people of the book, as even our enemies call us, we believe that God has a special place in his heart for Israel. It's the one place that Jesus Christ did all of his ministry. So just being able to have access to those places under Jewish rule, you are able to visit those sites that inform your faith and see where Jesus walked. But also for democracy or freedom to thrive, Israel is the one place in the Middle East, the only place in the Middle East where women unequivocally are able to get educated, able to drive, where you're able to put out a product and reap the benefit from it, where you're not under Islamic law and under Sharia law, where you're not run by terrorists that are occupying government. Israel is that one place. So geopolitically, it's a very important place, but for our faith as well, it's a critical place that God has always said he has his eye on. And so what Liberty Counsel has done over the years is bring students there. We've also made sure, and I've done this, studied, spent some time in Israel, making sure that Israel can make all the provisions it needs to defend itself. It has enemies on all of its borders. The nations that don't want it there in its inception have tried to attack Israel. They'll continue to try to attack Israel, Iran being probably the modern day most constant offender against Israel. Just allowing Israel to defend itself, defend its borders, stop terrorism from coming across its borders. Israel has the right to do so. So we've made the official and consistent argument in favor of Israel to be able to defend itself. The unfortunate thing is, you mentioned, that spills over into everyday American life, where Americans, Jewish Americans, are at schools, they're being harassed, and most recently, literally right up the road, 2 members from the Israeli embassy representing their country in the United States just walking out, and you have a terrorist, an evil person, identify them as Jews because of how they look or where they're walking, assassinate them in broad daylight, aligning themselves with not just the terrorists in Israel, but also the instigators on social media and the instigators in our academic settings that are saying that the Jews are evil and they need to be eliminated. That's who this terrorist and this murderer here in D.C. is aligning with. It was a clear crime that occurred, and it has its impetus at some of this anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish rhetoric that unfortunately has plagued American society. We're doing everything we can to stand up against that and just continuing to let folks know that this place is unique in God's heart. It's unique in our faith. It's unique geopolitically, and we have to do everything we can as Americans and Christians to help defend the land of Israel.
Well, thank you all for what you're doing at Liberty Counsel, because it's critical that we keep our relationship with Israel, that we actually, our allies, defend Israel because of our Judeo-Christian roots. As you mentioned, Christ was Jewish.
Exactly
and
right.
So our Christian roots come from Jesus Christ, which comes from Israel. So thank you all for what you're doing for the land of Israel, for the Israel people, and those tours. Those are very important. You know, I've been to Israel twice, and for me, it is just simply the Bible coming to life, right? You read about it, and the way I like to explain it, when people ask me, well, what is it like? What is it like? I say, well, it's the difference between reading about the beach and going to the beach.
That's a good way to do it.
So if you ever get a chance to go to Israel, I strongly, strongly encourage taking that trip to Israel. You know, our time is up here with Jonathan. We've had a great discussion today, but before we end, I want to give you a chance again to let the people know where they can find you and Liberty Counsel.
Yeah, sir, and thank you for your time. Thank you all for joining us. It's lc.org, so 5 letters, the letter L, the letter C.org, and the phone number is 407-975-1776.
Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you again for being with us here at Cure America. Again, I'm Donald T. Eason, the president here at the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. And we like to leave you with these words. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. May God bless you.